Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Hey, thank you for tuning in. You know that we're here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. We're streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We have podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, bunch of other locations. You folks are reposting our interviews too, and thank you for doing that. And we also are on YouTube. That's right. YouTube is where we are now posting our interviews, where you can see our guests. You can watch us as we maybe take a sip of whatever it is that we're drinking and enjoying a great conversation, as well as hopefully having you part of the conversation as well, at least as far as you're connecting with our guests. And we'll be giving you our guest website shortly. We also hope that you will do what you can, if this resonates with you, to support us financially. We would greatly appreciate that. So please go to our PayPal account. It is a link on our homepage and missions page for your security as well as ours. And then also asking you to participate in a decade-long event. It's the 2020s, the decade of perfect vision. Please spend some time going within, get to know yourself, all of yourself. I get that we do have a dark side, we do have a light side, but all of those sides make us who we are. And without us knowing who we really are, hey, you can't really get involved in your own life. And I will use this example. I just pulled up before this program the instructions for building the greenhouse that my wife and I bought back in the summer of 2020. And it was delivered to our house, and then the instructions were emailed in a PDF, and I'm looking through the instructions and I'm going, okay, they say, and to make room for this part to be referenced later. And I'm thinking, I better read all of the instructions. Otherwise, I could make a mistake. I could put holes in this wood, cause the wood to be inferior as far as too many holes and this and that and the other thing. So I'm reading through all the instructions. Well, going within and getting to know yourself is kind of that process. It really helps you to know who you are, where you come from. If you can do your DNA, great. If you get accurate information from your family and your relatives and all that, that's great too. So please take the time to do that. Our program today brings us back to a wonderful person that we have had on the program before. It's her second visit to Tell Me Your Story. Her name is Diane Collins, and I want to thank you so much for rejoining us, author of QuantumThink. It's great to have you with us. What a great smile you have.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's always great to be with you, and you have such a wonderful gift that you bring to the world with all your guests and amazing conversation that you lead us all into.
Well, I have to tell you that I have a lot of fun doing it. It's a blast to learn more about what people are doing, the work that they are doing, such as yourself. Now, when we were together last time, we spoke of your book, QuantumThink. And I know that...
Do you excuse me once? I just want to say...
No, please.
In case people want to look it up, the actual title is Do You QuantumThink?
Uh-huh.
So thanks for letting me fill that in.
And the answer to that question is probably no. Most people don't even know what QuantumThink is. So how could they know that they were doing it? Then again, there may be those who are quantum thinking, if you will, if I may expand on that, and they don't even realize that that's what it is that they're doing. What's the difference between the regular, ordinary, mundane thinking and quantum thinking, or QuantumThink here?
Right. Okay, good. Well, it's a good question. And when I get asked that question, I like to focus on, of course, I'll say, what is QuantumThink? But I like to focus on why should we quantum think? And what QuantumThink is, as a description, it's a system of thinking. It's a system of 21 distinctions and in thinking that are based in, we could say, the more accurate and up-to-date laws of the universe, according to science and according to spiritual wisdom, which are now re-merging again. They were never actually separate. And it really has to do, why should we quantum think? So I like to say these principles came through me because what I saw was that there was this chasm between how, as a humanity, how we want to be and how we actually are. And to take a very simple, the very first distinction, you could call them principles. QuantumThink is comprised of principles and practices. They're not one sentence. A distinction is a way of using the nuances of language that actually activates that wisdom within each one of us. So whether you're reading Do You Quantum Think, whether you're watching my video masterclass, Master Your Mind, Master Your Life, whether you're listening, I also have a audio program that I produce with my husband and partner in all areas, with Alan K. Collins, Master Quantum Think Coach. And however you imbibe during this show, in our conversation, what happens when you're quantum thinking, I was going to say the very first principle is called holistic and holographic. Because when you look at this, quote, great divide, the divisiveness, which has been rampant and kind of ramping up, as we all know, not only in this country, in the United States, where you and I are, Richard, but really all over the world. And you have to say, well, why? Is it that we have bad people? Is it that we, why are we trashing the environment? Why do we have a conflict between, how do we deal with climate change? All these different type of thoughts, opinions, some factual, some not, that divide us. When you say, what's the difference between quantum thinking? Quantum thinking is thinking from a new foundation, from a new perspective. So when you're quantum thinking, for example, the idea that we live in a reality of holistic and holographic. What does it mean? It means everything impacts everything else. Everything is interconnected. That's the holistic part. It's not just an alternative form of medicine or whatever, right? It's an actual universal, probably the deepest, most profound principle that is the functioning principle of this universe. And holographic, what does that mean? It means that the whole is contained in every smaller aspect of itself. And we know this as a metaphor, not just a metaphor, but as a demonstration, the idea of a hologram, where when you cut the negative of what makes a holographic three-dimensional image, what happens is you see the whole of that image on every little piece of the negative for that produces that image with laser light. So when you look at, well, what is that? My thing is making this all practical, that we become the living, walking, talking embodiments of wisdom, that we are here to be these master beings. And it's not just the elite spirituality. So what's the difference of quantum thinking is that you activate this in yourself and you start to live from that principle. So just taking that alone, if you know that, for example, in your own your own health, of your own well-being, is that we're multidimensional beings, okay? We have a physical, subtle energy, a virtual of the mind, spiritual of the heart. These are what I call living fully dimensionally. We're in cosmic principles. The operating principles of the universe operate throughout everything. And so within you and me, we have an esoteric dimension of the soul that has to do with evolution. And if you subscribe to various incarnations as our soul evolves, and of course, the seventh dimension that I call divine dimension, the mystery of all mysteries, source creator, responsible for all of it that we could never put into words because it's infinite. So when you look at your health, for example, what does it mean to quantum think and live holistically and holographically? You look at your health from every dimension.
Yeah.
Or I say, where do you enter the hologram? So it's like, yes, we have been, okay, let me get to the ordinary thinking, because this is a good example. Our thinking has been conditioned by the industrial age worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that view. It's just that's in the 17th century, where scientists declared, probably to separate themselves out from the clergy, only physical matter is real. What are the fundamental science, physics? I'm not a scientist, but I study science. Quantum think is not about science. It's about how the discoveries of science, how really the overarching ideas of the nature of reality that comes from science and spirituality, how that shapes the way we think. And the important part is that how we can use quantum think as a tool. It's a methodology, a modern methodology to activate this within us so that personally and collectively, we can start thinking more in sync with nature. Mm-hmm. And more in sync with the way the world is today. Not only the ancient times when, we know indigenous cultures were more sensitive to things, to nature and the interaction between us and nature, but also how do we integrate? You see, I'm a modern girl. And I'm also that and the ageless girl. So this is very important, because the fact is, I know you live in a rural area. It doesn't matter where you live. We're still living in a developed world, in a mm-hmm. developing society. Yeah. So we need to learn to live with all of it. So that's like a long explanation of what quantum think is about, is making that leap from the industrial age, which separated things out into parts, which we needed at that time to evolve ourselves. We needed to say, let's organize, let's get the disciplines of the sciences. Let's get into the specialties that we need in order to bring humanity to ever higher places. But we forgot that was just one distinction, maybe. Yeah. And so, as I say, that was called the classical mechanical worldview. In Do You Quantum Think, my book, I say, I call it lovingly the old worldview, classical mechanical worldview sandwich. I'll take matter sliced, keep the spirit on the side, and hold the soul.
I like that. That's what I say at the deli. It's exactly what I say at the deli. Now, the thought that came to me as you were describing, especially the holographic aspect, absolutely clarifies for me, being born and raised Catholic and being taught about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity. People say, that's can't be. That's impossible. Well, when I start thinking about that, and then this draws us as human beings into this mix, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, whatever other names you choose to use, those are the representations of the hologram. But then we also read that we were, quote unquote, created by the Creator in the image of and the likeness of. So we are also part of the hologram. And each one of us contains the whole of that hologram. So when it comes to understanding, going back, when it comes to understanding the Holy Trinity, I understand it now. It's not a mystery. It makes perfect sense. And then when you incorporate even some of the things that Jesus said, for example, you can be gods too.
The kingdom of God is within you.
And the kingdom of God is within you. And be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect, part of the hologram, etc. I mean, and again, we go on and on quoting. It says, oh my God, it's so simple. This isn't complicated at all, but your explanation of the splitting and the ordering at the deli counter is a prime example of what went wrong, so to speak. And as long as we maintained that, no, you got to go to the priest, confession, communion, the various sacraments, et cetera, you don't need to read the book. Then this goes back thousands of years, several thousand years. You don't need to read the book. I will tell you what the book says. I will tell you of the ancient wisdom. I will tell you what God is saying. And even today, we still have people who are doing that. God has told me to tell you, Diane, that,
Well, I think that
you don't need me to tell you anything. Which also answers the next question, but I still want you to elaborate on it. Where you said this came through you. And I would then put the question, from where? Or maybe more accurately, from whom? But we've already determined that if you're part of the hologram, I'm part of the hologram, we know where it came from, right?
Right. And you know what? We each have, what you said was paradoxical, because it's true that we don't need someone to say, no, this is how it is, right? Mm-hmm. I know because God told me this, to tell mm-hmm. you. This is why it's so important to be able to connect, to get to the real wisdom that is unfettered by any of our opinions or conditioning in any way. But I was going to say, paradoxically, we also each hold a piece of the wisdom, mm-hmm. okay, that comes through each one of us uniquely. So a lot of times, Richard, like people will read or they'll, hear some things I say in QuantumThink, perspective or whatever, and they go, oh, that sounds like Zen Buddhism, or that sounds like, it came from the Christian mystics, or that sounds like, this other guy who's talking about whatever. Well, yes, there are going to be, if you look at universal wisdom, mm-hmm. that's the point. Mm-hmm. But the way the wisdom expresses, and again, and I said earlier, we can never, there are so many names for what we call God, right? Or
mm-hmm. Yes.
As the Buddhists, we know they don't even use that word God or think of that. But whatever you're using, that the many facets of God, as you say, holographic, we each hold infinitely within us the potentiality, the ability, it's more than an ability, to connect to that wisdom that we attribute to God. I'm going to use the word God, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
It's easier. It's a good word. Anyway, that we attribute to God. But, when you start to study all these different religions, which I was always interested in, and all the esoteric, metaphysical things, sciences and arts that I also am interested in, and you see like for example, in, the Far East in India, they have, I don't know, maybe hundreds of names for God. And so the Trinity, that is a core universal principle.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a Christian to understand that Trinity. Because what is it really, right? It's ultimate creator in the form of, right, the Son, right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Spirit that keeps us all together. And I think that, I don't have it off the top of my head, but you can find this Trinity in many different religions.
Yes.
Now, but the point that getting back is that we each come in. What came through me? Now, I was questioning since I was about 4 years old, I went like this, literally in the mirror in my house, my parents' house. What is this? What am I? And I became self-aware. I remember the exact moment. And then I started thinking, how did things come about? So I had this inquiring mind. And then as I got into teenage years and started becoming aware of the news and of wars and of things like, what? We're mass producing weapons to kill each other en masse? There's something wrong with this. I thought I got off on the wrong planet. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, right? But then eventually you realize that you want to make your contribution.
Yeah.
And you start, and I sincerely have an intent and want us to start teaching children at a young age what I'm saying, that every one of us has a purpose. I was listening to your shows about the bees. I have something in my book about the frogs. Everything, this universe is genius beyond what any one of us can fathom, but we know, right, that it is. So when you start to look and say, well, why am I here? What's my unique wisdom? As soon as you have an intent to discover that, intent is the active dynamic of creation that we have been divinely bestowed with, as you say, right? In the image of. What do we know for sure? The only thing we know for sure, there's creation. Now, that means that we have been granted some ability to create. Can we create the moon? Maybe not. But as human beings on this planet, in this cosmos, we have the ability to create.
And I will add to that. I will add to that very briefly and let you continue. I've even stated that as far as I know, I didn't create myself. But by the same token, as far as I know, I did. I don't know. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. Either the cat's alive or dead, but
Right. That's the paradox.
Yeah, that's the paradox.
And that is, it's said all the time in quantum physics that, right, it's highly paradoxical because two things that seem to be, from ordinary, what I, again, lovingly call the old worldview, classical worldview thinking, when you look at that and you think, well, the scientists, they wanted to be able to prove, for example, is energy a particle or a wave?
Yeah.
And so it, or if we could examine and reduce the smallest fundamental part of physical reality, then we could control and, command nature, right? And so they call it in that old physics reductionistic, because reduce it to its sum of its parts. Mechanistic, because it works in a mechanical cause and effect way. I forget the other words for it, but the point being that is one slice, one aspect of reality. That's like taking, one part of the Holy Trinity and thinking it's the whole thing. It's not. So my great revelation that I call it, because I had this intent. If that, along the way you come across thought, okay, how do we create what we want in life? How do we create what we want on this planet? How do we create ourselves, right? You say, well, did I create myself? Well, I'm certainly seem like I'm doing something with myself every day. I'm evolving, I'm developing myself, I'm learning or not. And so you realize that you have, right? We have destiny and free will integrated. So we step in and we're co-collaborators. So we're co-collaborators with divine intelligence that comes through us. I just realized what the question you asked me before. And we're co-collaborators with each other. So when you say, well, how did, I was going to say, my great revelation is that though we imagine we think freely and independently, that we actually, for the most part, don't, even though in every moment we have the possibility of choosing. But we have this overarching worldview, what we believe to be true about the nature of reality, how it works, what's possible, what's not, what we're capable of as individuals or not, the way things work. So what I realize is that we're in a quantum age, which is now quantum physics proving what the ancient spiritual universal mastery traditions have said, right? Holistic and holographic, multidimensional, everything is interconnected, everything influences everything else, right? Energy and energy intelligent universe, conscious universe, all that a physical only is real orientation did not necessarily address. That's why I say keep the spirit on the side and hold the soul. You couldn't even talk about that. What? You're fired,
Yeah.
But anyway, so the point being, like, where did it come from? It comes from, where did QuantumThink come from? First of all, it reminds me of the book that I'm sure a lot of people read by Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, right? A book that I read very young. Did you ever read that book, Siddhartha?
I have not yet, no.
Well, I don't know how that came up a long time ago, but it's one of these spiritual books, like a person on the path, right, of self-discovery. But the reason I brought it up, oh no, it wasn't that book. It was another book he wrote called Demian, Demian. And it was, the first page was, I only wanted to be in accord with my true self. That was like the opening quote on the book. And I always think of that because that's really what it was. So I was following, I only wanted to be in accord with my true self. What was that? I wanted to know, how do we actually get access to the creation principles so that we can master them, so that we can really have a great life and make it that way for everybody on the planet and all the creatures and minerals and everything else we share. So that's really where does it come from? It's that ultimate mystery. But if you think about, I think about like divine creator, whatever, creates these souls, right? And souls go throughout various incarnations, as we call it, this lifetime. And so your soul is evolving. This is just what I'm making up, okay? I'm not saying it's the absolute truth either. It's just something that, what I call the art of distinguishing, that brings something into your awareness in a way that enables you to live joyfully, okay? Masterfully, joyfully, knowledgeably. So you think, I like this particular story. You're saying, tell me your story, right? God made the souls have to evolve. They take their journeys in different incarnations. You come in with, and I like to study astrology, so it's a blueprint, right, of possibilities that you have to learn and develop in this lifetime. And whether you do or not, again, we have free will. So you have this soul's journey in this incarnation. You have a choice how you're going to relate with it. whether you're going to develop yourself or not. And if you get in touch with that, I only want it to be in accord with my true self.
Mm-hmm.
That will bring the ultimate joy, because then you follow it. It's like an adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like clues. You get these clues along the way. Like I like to say, like the silent tap on the shoulder. Wait a minute, Richard. You're going that way, but I think you better take a right turn. Right?
Yeah.
And that's it. So where does it come from? It comes from divine inspiration that and I love how you say always in the beginning of your opening of your shows, that you go to that silent place inside and you connect to that message within yourself. Where did Jesus get it from? It's no different, right? Yeah. Where did Buddha get it from? Where did Krishna get it from? Where did Moses get it from? Mohammed, I'm trying to name all the big religions.
Yeah, I hear you.
But, I like Hunam, whatever. But it comes through in what I like to call costuming, in the most positive way of saying it. But, some people, you're born into be a Catholic. Somebody else is born into some other religion. And you start to see that imagery, the relationship that connects you to the divine. And I want to talk to you about Paramahansa Yogananda, because I heard you mention him a few times.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He was a big influence. I would say one of the great influences in my life development. But it's like it comes in. It doesn't mean yours is right, mine is wrong, his is good, yours is bad. It means when you're thinking, getting back to the very first distinction in QuantumThink system, holistic and holographic, you realize you're going to see it, you're going to relate to divine or spirit or whatever you call it, a different way than he is, she is, they are. But that doesn't make it the either or divisiveness. No, my way is right. No, your way is right. That makes it, when you're quantum thinking, you have the perspective of all perspectives. That's one of the principles also, which means you can include perspectives without making them right or wrong. Not to say that, there isn't a rightness, right? Like the right things to do in life.
Sure.
Anyway, so that's where it comes from.
Yeah. Or even putting it to dovetail off of the right thing to do, or even putting it into a different category or delineation. There is no right or wrong. It's not about right or wrong. It's about learning. That's what it's about. There is no failure or success. It's about learning and having the experience. And to what you have already stated, the whole aspect of self, individuality, versus true self, which is the connectiveness to all, and I mean all, not everything, but all, okay?
All that is.
All that is, all that ever was, is, or will be. That's just the way that it is. And, it's just, there's a wonderful book I carry it with me everywhere I go. It's called The Impersonal Life. And it was given to me, 39 years ago on my 21st birthday, now in my 60s, which I'm excited about. And it was given to me by a dear friend of mine who was also my acting coach. I considered her to be a mentor, although she hated that phrase. She's, no, I'm just your friend. Okay. Very good friend who passed away March of 2019. And we used to have these unbelievable conversations, but she shared this with me, and I've read it a number of times. It's now available on YouTube as an Audible. It's also available on Audible. I've even recorded it. I have the reel-to-reels at home when I recorded it back in I think the 80s or early 90s. And it's basically a conversation, more of a one-way conversation with God. I mean, that's the implication. And what you stated earlier is what's phrased in this book. It says, you think that you're an individual and you have free will, and these thoughts that you have, you think are yours, but they're not yours. They're mine. And you think that when you have past life regression therapy and you go into hypnosis and you start to tap into all of these other lives that you think you've had and these experiences that you've had, you haven't lived before. All you're doing is tapping into the lives of my manifestation. Now, when I first read that part of it, I thought, does that really change the importance of past life regression? And I realized it doesn't, because the whole point of going and checking out those past lives, quote unquote past lives, is to learn more about self. Well, but if we're part of the hologram and we're connected to all that ever was, is, or will be, well, then there you go. That's why you're able to tap into it, because you're part of all of it. You're connected to all of it.
That's exactly right.
And so when you hear the phrase, create your own reality, well, now, wait a minute. If I create my own reality and I signed a contract, metaphorically, euphemistically, or literally, before I came into this lifetime to have the experiences I'm having, then I created this life. Ergo, there has to be some level of truth to the fact that I did create myself and the person that I am today. And that's neither, that's just what is. It's neither right nor wrong, good or bad, the right path, the wrong path. It just is.
It just is what's so. And, here's the important thing about thinking, quantum thinking is also thinking in paradox, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Holding two things that seem like they don't, like
diametrically opposed,
appear to be right in conflict, what they're really not.
That's right.
So we comment, because even past lives, are they really in the past, or are we just connecting in? No, if you use sacred geometry, and I like to think of it as one of the distinctions in QuantumThink, because I know you like to know it, is called resonance, and it's the biggest chapter in the book, because the universe is mathematical, it's geometric, it's of sound, and all those things are connected. So when you look at that, well, we're connecting in, I think of it as coordinates, and I'm no mathematician.
Yeah.
But you think like there's coordinates, and when you connect into that creates form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, take that on a highly, big level of complexity. And I don't want to get too abstract here, because I want to get back to today's life. But it is paradoxical, because you don't, we're not individually in our finite self responsible for creating, and we are. So it's both. It's like we
both
are
and
we're not.
Both and.
And so I like to think, I say it like this, that an aspect of mastery, because I like to say and discuss in my own work with people that this is a time, this great shift, and what you call, the 2020, the time of vision, the decade. I like that you extended it.
Me too.
I love it.
I was afraid that
you have to change your opening if you don't understand.
Well, I was afraid that I was going to have to come up with something related to blackjack for 2021 or something. 21 hit me. I got 21.
Because there's all kinds of, I see my lighting is changing here. It went from,
well,
anyway,
see, everything's
on the ocean in Sunny Isles Beach.
Exactly.
Florida, and it's like, it was raining when we got on. Now it's sunny. Anyway, so it's coming in from. So anyway, where were we? So when you look at the paradox, I like to think of it as we're here to be fully self-realized beings, such as Paramahansa Yogananda, right? Where why did these self-realized masters, the gurus, Vivekananda, who came, whatever,
Babaji.
right, Babaji, all these different gurus who were guided, they say, right, to come to the West, and they developed, right, to give people an experience of the self with a capital S. And then once that becomes, you become aware of that, it's like, wait a minute, yes, I want that state. I want to become established in the state of a master. What is that? It doesn't mean that you're, controlling everybody, but you're in command of yourself. You're in command. When you go back to what you were saying, Richard, about we're here, it's infinite possibility. We could tap into anything. That's why quantum physics, the principle in quantum physics called non-locality, that we have a non-local mind. The mind is not located in the brain. The brain is the transmitter, connector, so to speak, of what? Of intelligence, of, it's like all of the above integrated: consciousness, energy, intelligence, that divine spark. So that the question becomes, if we are tuned in, if we're connected to all that is, right, and infinite potential, the question becomes, what are we going to manifest? And that's where the immanent self, so I call that our connection to all that is, that unbounded awareness that we call higher self. And we're at the same time, the worldly self, the self that you call Richard and I call Dianne, and whatever we're, play here on earth, all the roles we play. So I call that the immanent self. It's the self that's, right? Again, the roles we play. We're both of those at the same time. So it's not like we have, meditation, obviously, these kind of mindfulness, all these practices are great because that's like the conditioning of the all that is, the transcendent self. But for me, the real mastery is living in both of those states at the same time. So you're not, in yoga, probably they call the watcher, that mindfulness where you're watching yourself.
You're the observer.
Say, like, some people get mixed up and think that's like a state of detachment from life, but it's not. Because when you integrate that higher self with the local self, what you're doing is you are able to engage in the true richness of life fully, I like to call it fully dimensionally, because you're acknowledging that we are fully dimensional beings. But getting back to these gurus who, we call taking out of guru means, to my knowledge, taking from the dark into the light. Into the light of what? Into this light of awareness, where we can awaken literally beyond our automatic mechanical conditioning, which I say there's nothing wrong with us. This is what I wanted to bring to our conversation here, is that it's time to transcend the either or, which is so embedded in our culture right now. And even the people who are, quote, the consciousness crowd, as I lovingly call, that where you're on a conscious path, where you want to awaken, where you want to live a life of mastery. Maybe not, not everybody's there, but you always have a chance right now to choose that.
Yeah.
You don't need any special training for it. It's just intent. And so when you look at that, and then people go into oh, this guy is terrible. This girl is horrible, and that the corporations, that's a famous one today.
Oh, yeah.
Corporation bashing, ego bashing, this bashing, that bashing, those are all outcomes of the either or, that mechanism that
Right.
I say it's time to break free of and get to that perspective of all perspectives. Because once you break free of either or, all this stuff that you say, oh, the shadow side, the this, that, well, maybe we don't need pain to take a quantum leap
Mm-hmm.
into a joyful state.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't need that. Some people think we do. We have to have a pain. You have to have that experience. I think, Richard, and I'd like to know what you think. If we're creating reality, why would I create that as my reality? And one other thing before I want to hear your answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote in the very beginning of Do You Quantum Think? Maybe there's nothing wrong with us. Maybe we've just arrived at a phase in human evolution where it's time for us to take this literal quantum leap in consciousness. Now, I've been being told for the last 20, 25 years. I actually said 25 years ago, I was always told, oh, you're ahead of your time. My husband says, you better not be ahead of your time anymore. You'll never, nobody, it'll never catch up. If you want to get your work out, you better stop being. Well, we're in this time now where we are in the great shift. We are in the decade, as you call it, of the 2020 vision. And what I'm saying is, if we're creating reality, why do we have to think there's anything wrong with us? Why can't we just see that people have been in a conditioned, automatic, mechanical state in many ways that we're not even aware? People who are doing terrible things are they're not actually a choice. That's what I have to say. And when I mean choice, I mean awakened state, choosing, rather than just reaction, which is not choosing.
That's true. Yeah, there's a difference. It's action or reaction. Action is conscious, aware choice. I have to share with you something that happened on my way in today as our conversation continues here. And we're talking with Dianne Collins. And do you quantum think? I hope you do. If you don't, then why don't you go to her website, dianecollins.com, and find out more about what it means to quantum think. On my way down the hill with my wife this morning, there was a parade of vehicles, trucks coming up the 154, which is a 2-lane highway. And one of the trucks in a blind curve coming in our direction decided the parade was just going too slow for him. And so what does he do? And I'm talking about a blind curve here. He pulls out into our lane and all of a sudden realizes, oh my God, here comes a truck. And he got over just in time.
Wow.
And I'm looking around going, because there's hillsides on both sides of the roadway. Where the hell am I going to go?
Right. No place to go.
I got no place to go. Now I certainly could have slowed down to hopefully minimize the damage and this and that and the other. Thank God I didn't have to do that. But this is the kind of decision making that some people are making. He is reacting to his situation where this parade isn't going fast enough. And so he's got to find a way to move forward faster. And then we actually did have a second incident when we finally got down into the city on the city streets. I'm thinking once we get down off the mountain here, everything should calm down. And then I realized, okay, is that the way today is going? All right, that's fine. Then I'm just going to up my awareness. Okay. I'm going to raise my my consciousness and my awareness to be extra vigilant today of what's going on around me. Go a little slower, a little more cautious. That is an awakened state, not out of fear. Don't get me wrong. This was not out of fear. It was more out of a sense of, I really don't want to connect with people in this way. I've already done that once in this lifetime. That's how I have the truck in the first place, is because I was in a collision with another vehicle pulling out of its driveway, who pulled out right in front of me, and bam, and there went the Volvo, totaled. And the next thing you know, we have a truck, which someone said, you don't have to manifest the truck and things like that in that fashion. And it's like, well, you might be.
A little safer.
Well, and at the same time, this goes to what you were saying before. How do you know that that wasn't the way that it was supposed to happen? Because it was a non-injury accident. Neither of us was hurt.
Beautiful.
So that was a wonderful thing in that respect. And at the end of it all, yeah. And I even spoke to the gentleman just before I left, saying, hey, and I extended my hand, shook his hand, and I said, hey, I'm just glad that we're both okay. No, but neither of us was hurt. Now let's go and make it a better day than that particular moment that we both, felt. But it kind of goes to, there's almost that paradox as you speak about seeing the world and saying we need to raise our consciousness, because there is a certain element in just saying that is saying that, yeah, the way things are today, it's not quite right. I'd really like things better. And I often say to people, in that regard, for example, I have a promo that's running, and I try to say this every so often in the program, that when I'm talking about, changing the world, I'm not saying this is an awful, terrible, icky place, we need to get out of here. No, because where we are right now is fantastic. But that doesn't mean that we can't make it better for everyone. And there's the difference that I think that people need, the distinction that you're talking about, is that there's nothing wrong with the way things are today. They are actually, I've heard this phrase and I like to use it, they're actually in divine right order. Because if we didn't see what was going on, we wouldn't realize, you know what? Okay, things are fine the way they are. But again, there's always room for some improvement. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to paint the house because, the paint's chipping off, or I'm going to do this or that or the other. So these are the kinds of things that I think that we need to be talking about. Unfortunately, we're also running out of time on the program.
Because I wanted to talk a little bit about the astrology of what.
Well, I tell you what, let's come back to that. Let's set up another program to talk about, I want to talk about the astrology as you see it, but also sacred geometry. Okay. I want to talk about both of those because we're going to be diving into that subject as well with others. Dianne Collins is my guest, and we are wrapping up this particular edition of Tell Me Your Story, DianneCollins.com. Do you quantum speak is the title of the book.
QuantumThink.
Well, that'll be your next book, Quantum Speak. Do You Quantum Think is the title of the book, and I certainly hope you'll go to her website and pick up a copy. We will be linked, as I've said before, to your website. And I thank you so much for joining us. And before we wrap up, I just remind our listeners, the program comes your way Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times. Podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and on YouTube, where you can watch these programs as well. And we also encourage you, if you can do so, support us financially. PayPal account for your security as well as ours. And please participate in the 2020s, the decade of perfect vision. Final three questions for you as we wrap this up. And they are, first of all, who is Dianne Collins?
A girl with a new point of view.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
I want to achieve a quantum thinking world, which means that we will be a world of enlightened, masterful beings who love each other and love being here.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
And that's my life's purpose, is to be able to communicate that and have people not that I have the answer, but that because of my work, you connect to that divinity, to that intelligence, to that wisdom within you.
Dianne Collins, author of Do You Quantum Think? DianneCollins.com. I'm Richard Dugan. This has been Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And I thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal.